Mountville parents and guardians. We want to welcome you to our first conversation with the school counselor, Mrs. Foote, and also our school nurse, Mrs. Essick, and I am Miss Kane, the school principal. Today we are going to be discussing a hot topic for many of our students as well as just the public in general, which is anxiety. And Mrs. Foote is going to be sharing some information about this topic. So Mrs. Foote.
Hello there, I'm Mrs. Foote. Like Miss Kane has said, it is really important. It's a hot topic right now. And so we're here to talk about it. Worry is like a rocking chair. It will give you something to do, but it won't get you anywhere. Kind of looking at anxiety in that way, anxiety-prone individuals, it's a full-time job for them. Kids may not know the way to think or feel when they're having anxiety, or even to identify it as the anxiety. There's a genetic component to anxiety, and chances are that if you are here or hearing this, you yourself have had some concern about worry in your kids, or you may too have had worried in the past yourself. So we're going to kind of look at about worry in terms of the elementary world. Worry in the elementary world, as you see here, some of the common concerns and or anxious, nervous feelings come from just different classwork, homework, animals from home, things with them, teachers, peers. I would definitely stress that peers and social connections this year with our COVID-19 pandemic. That is a big stressor for students this year and here at the school as well, because students are doing their best to try to connect. But some of the students are virtual and some students are in person, and we have to stay connecting with our classrooms. Students aren't able to connect outside of their class when they go to recess and things like that. So peer connections have been difficult this year, and we're trying to kind of work with students on that. Whether safety drills, punishment and consequences, things like that. Reading and speaking out loud. Sometimes that brings concern for a student. Death and grief. Testing, quizzes, separation anxiety come into school. And with all the transitions and changes in our school schedules and things like that this year, you might see a rise in anxiety in your student at home. And then just sickness sometimes causes anxiety for students. If we're talking about childhood anxiety, based on childmind.org, 7.1% of our youth ages 3 to 17 have been given an anxiety diagnosis, but symptoms sometimes begin at age 6. 18% of our adults, or about 40 million people, are affected by anxiety in a given year. Anxiety is the most common mental illness in the US. And these numbers just only represent the people who have sought out help and have been actually diagnosed. So there might be a rise in that. And there's also a huge rise this year just because with our pandemic and all of the media things that have been going on out there, and just how our world is ever changing with technology. A lot of this worry does distract us from our everyday thing, and it really just drains us. It drains our energy and makes things harder for us to do, and any risk that we take, and then also our developmental growth. When we're talking about what the student and or adult is feeling, a lot of times when their anxiety has gone to an escalated level and or acute stress, the fight or flight comes into play. Some worry is normal for students, but when a worry actually starts to take over a student's mind and the interactions that they're having, and it impedes to the function of their everyday life, then it becomes a real problem. It's normal for students to have nervousness feelings when they go to school, the first day, stage fright, meeting a new person and or a friend. But when this anxiety becomes to a level where it starts to run the things that the students are doing, and it's an everyday problem, that is when we need to kind of seek additional support to try to help get to the bottom of what's causing that anxiety. When we talk about a worrier themselves, and I'm going to kind of start with this a little bit, and then I'll ask Miss Essex to kind of join in a little bit. But when we're looking at a student who is a worrier, they get that unsettling feeling in their stomach, in their chest. Sometimes they say that somebody's like an elephant is sitting on their chest. They're starting to feel a certain way, but they might not know to recognize it. And so sometimes it makes them think a different thought. So such as like negative thoughts about things, and that causes more anxiety and more worry for them. So it's just kind of looking at the perspective of what it is to worry as a worrier themselves. What it typically looks like. Students have frequent trips to the nurses or the bathroom, and they're feeling sick. They get headaches, stomach aches. I know our department here works highly close with our nurse and kind of work hand in hand when we're trying to deal with the student when they have been assessed with anxiety. So I'm going to let Miss Essex talk a little bit about that.
So typically, like Ms. Foote said, we work very closely together. And if I start to see a student pop down to the nurse's office a little more frequently, usually I would see headaches or upset stomach. Sometimes I'll see somebody come down and they just kind of have a different complaint every time. And that to me is kind of their way of reaching out and asking for a little bit of help. So a lot of times I will ask a bunch of questions to just kind of assess the situation. And a lot of it goes off of what's on the PowerPoint right now. I'll ask them, are you having trouble sleeping? Did you sleep okay last night? Are you having trouble eating? Were you able to eat breakfast this morning? How much water are you drinking? Then sometimes I work into questions about, are you having any trouble in class? How's your teacher this year? How's the work this year? Or I'll ask about friends. So after a while, just kind of asking these questions and watching the student, I can start to see a couple of things that I can pull out. And that's usually when Ms. Foote and I will kind of discuss things and see about doing more frequent check-ins with the students to just kind of support them while they're here at school.
Thank you. And yes, we do a lot of check-ins once we notice or are made aware of a student in terms of anxiety to support them while they're here at school. What it looks like on a student's plate these days. You know, I know we talked about how changes have occurred since last year, for sure, with the pandemic, things in the news media. There are a lot of different worries that are basically that are on students' plate this year. And then, you know, there's a like age of anxiety for students. They're facing many different challenges and stressors. These can be stressors within the family, stressors within the environment, media exposure, peer relationships, and social problems. You know, wanting to have that, juggling the responsibilities of their performance and how they're doing in school. So what we're going to kind of discuss a little bit now is looking at the different strategies that may be helpful for you to work with your student on. In the future. You know, a lot of times we talk to students and try to find what the immediate trigger is, and then kind of go off of that to see how we can help them cope. Every student has different coping strategies that may be helpful for them and that might work for them. We've done deep breathing, which is kind of like blowing out candles, teaching a student how to deep breathe, belly breathing, naming their senses while they're learning to deep breathe. We've done different positive self-talk statements. If you notice that your student at home is doing a lot of negative self-talk, we try to work with them on trying to reframe those thoughts into ones that are going to motivate them and be more positive. I also find that working with students on calming visualizations, like having the student come in and not telling them calm down, we talk about let's visit the most favorite place that you'd like to go, you know, your happy place. We talk about the beach. You know, that's my happy place. I'm not sure if that's for other students, but just talking about their happy place, helping them imagine that place, and then that kind of helps along with the calming and all of that. And then we start to talk about the anxiety itself to see, again, how we can kind of help and support the student while they're here. And then, muscle relaxation, yoga techniques have helped with students. Different worry creatures. I have a worry animal. He's a worry monster. He's a stuffed monster that has like a little zip, and you can have students write down their worry, and then you put that in that monster's mouth, and it's like taking the worry away. And then we can kind of start talking about how we're going to do that, and how we're going to support the student while they're here. I think it's pretty important to find what strategy works best for your children. This is just a few strategies that we like to use, but there are many more that are out there on the web that you can search. And then if you need additional resources, you can always reach out to myself or Miss Kane or Miss Essex for more information. Helping kids conquer their worry as the adult, as their parents, sometimes that's a worry for ourselves. We might have our own worries. We have to make sure that when we are working with our students and trying to find what best helps them, we need to really take interest in what's happening in their school life, on their teams, with their friends. Also seeming to making sure that we're asking about their worry if we recognize it, because you're probably the first person that may recognize it before the teacher or the staff member at the school recognizes. Parents usually recognize a change in behavior. And I think it's once you recognize that change in the behavior, we're trying to figure out where it's coming from. Have kids talk about their fears, helps them reduce their worries about those fears. And then also providing students guidance and solutions and how to attack some of the fears that they may have. I think it's pretty important, as a parent myself, I really believe in reassuring and comforting my student themselves when they are dealing with signs of anxiety. And it's just good. And you can do a lot of different things to reassure your student, giving them the time to listen to them, but also just a hug sometimes when somebody's experiencing that type of feeling. Because that doesn't minimize the student's feeling at that point. It actually shows that you care and you're there to try to help them tackle what's kind of causing that problem. Additional strategies for caregivers. You don't want to focus on what is wrong, but rather what is going good for the student. I know it's sometimes hard to do that, because you want to, I know myself, I like to go right to it, try to solve the problem, but that's not always the best route. We have to kind of guide our student to figuring out the problem themselves, but also be that sounding board for them if they need it, and provide those different guided intelligence to the student and helping them kind of figure it out. But I think it's really important to focus on the positives that they might be doing, because they might feel this way, but if you can kind of focus on some of the good things that are their strengths and successes of the child might be helpful. You can help with just being calm and modeling that calmness yourself. I know that, if we're anxious, the student's going to feel anxious. So if you show that you're confident and that you are able to be calm, and you show that you have confidence in your child to solve what's making them anxious, that goes a long way. And I think it's sometimes really important to remind ourselves to make sure that when there are difficult situations, that we help our student face that fear so that they can become somebody that can face that, on an everyday life. Because I'm not saying by providing this information that students are going to be able to conquer the anxiety and it's going to go away. It's more about recognizing the anxiety and then working towards to a point where it doesn't overtake their everyday life, okay? And they can actually cope with it. If you do find that your student has issues where it is starting to overtake their everyday life and the things that they're doing and the things that they enjoy, I would highly suggest connecting with the teacher, the counselor, and then any extra additional resources that may be available outside in your community. Sometimes talking to your pediatrician about just different things that may be changing the behavior. So it's really important to do that. Here is a list that we provided for you, and there's a lot more books out there, but these are just different resources